Hi everybody, lovely to be here. This is a surprise that I'm finding myself speaking in the middle of a jazz concert, and I have to say, Penton School of Music Jazz School is absolutely fantastic. I'm loving it. It's absolutely brilliant. So thank you for the invitation to be here. I do want to talk about surprises, some of them very trivial and some of them more important. But I thought I'd begin just by telling you about my own music career, as this is the context for it. So my music career began when I was 7 years old, and then it finished when I was 8 years old. I didn't like the piano teacher, and I was far too busy playing cowboys and Indians in the back field. And I was very good at that. But anyway, that was it, end of the story. Well, not quite, because we have children, we've got 4 children, and our children did music, and I loved it. But then when they flew the nest, the piano in our household was going to go silent. So I thought, I'll take myself off for some piano lessons at the age of 50. And so I had a go at it, and it was rather amusing, actually. A friend was staying with me one time. I used to cram just before the piano lesson, do all the practicing that I should have done through the week, and then go off to the piano lesson. But my friend was actually hearing me practice, and she said, "Dave, you should have stuck to cowboys and Indians." But 2 or 3 weeks into my second attempt at piano lessons, I had an email, but it was a stray email, and it was from a church the secretary was wanting to write to somebody with the Christian name David, but they got the wrong surname. So David Hill got the email, which was intended for David somebody else. But she was looking for an organist for next Sunday. So this was a bit of a surprise to me, actually. But I thought, well, I'm going to have some fun with this, actually. And I did a reply saying, well, I am making progress now, and I can now play the right hand of When the Saints Go Marching In. But I advise you, if you want anything more complex than that, to keep looking. So I had a rather embarrassed email back saying, oops. So anyway, that was my music career, and I am loving what's going on here. It's fantastic. So I will tell you. So that's my first surprise about the invitation to play the organ in the church. So my second surprise, and I guess this is the context. I want to tell you a little bit about this thing, and this try praying thing. And I stand before you a totally bewildered person. I am just a little bit entrepreneurial. I do from time to time have ideas, but mercifully, most of those never see the light of day. But I did have an idea about 15 years ago to write a prayer guide for people who are not religious and don't do church. And even that is a little bit humorous to me, because personally, I hate prayer guides. I lose the will to live when I see a prayer guide. So what was I doing writing a prayer guide? But anyway, I wrote it, and it was evaluated and designed and then printed. And this is going back about 15 years ago now. And it was all mingled with our own return to Edinburgh, because we'd been down in Yorkshire for 16 years, but we returned to Edinburgh. And there were 2 things that happened which surprised me, sticking with the theme. So the first thing was that we needed an earlier edition of this to be redesigned and reprinted. So I went to see a Christian designer and met Jane, and I put the first edition on her table and said, look, this needs redoing. And but the point of it is, it's for people who aren't religious and don't do church. And what happened is freeze-framed in my memory, because Jane, her eyes filled with tears, and she said, this is huge. And I thought, it's only a booklet. She was seeing in this far more than I was. So that was the first little surprise in this section. The second one happened a few weeks later, when I met some people, the Parliamentary Prayer Group, perhaps some of you know of them, and went along, gave them all a try praying booklet, and told them some stories, and then they prayed. And it was very affirming and very encouraging. And I'll just simply let you know, and you can use your imagination here, but they weren't quiet prayers. So they really gave it some welly and prayed and encouraged. But there's a lady there, and this is what truly surprised me. There was a lady there from South Africa. She held up this booklet, and she said, "This booklet is for the nation." And I thought, yikes, I have no idea what's going on. It's just a booklet. But then she changed what she said. She said, no, actually, I'm bursting with prophecy about this. This booklet is for the nations, plural. And it's at that point that I was just totally bewildered. And I have been bewildered for the last 15 years. She was right, because that's what's happened. And I'm not going to go into a long spiel about try praying, but I'll tell you a few little stories about it. But it has grown. There's been 13 editions of this, and there's over 1 million copies of it that have been printed and distributed. It's being currently used this year, the last 12 months, by 1,000 churches in the UK. It's spread to 13 countries, and so America, Australia, New Zealand, France, Germany, Czech Republic, hopefully soon the Ukraine, Hungary, and I'm missing some out, but it is utterly bewildering how this thing has just grown and grown and grown. So this is a surprise to me, and I am quite amazed. But the thing that really makes it work are the actual stories of what's happened in people's lives. So Michelle from Belfast was driving along, and having been at the doctor's consultation, what's that banging, by the way? Is that me somehow? It's the mic.
Close to your mouth. So if we move it out a wee bit. Hopefully that'll be all right.
Thanks. How's that? Shall I start again? So yeah, Michelle was driving away from a doctor's consultation, quite devastated and in tears. And something said to her, as she was driving, "Look left." So she looked left, and there was a church with a Try Praying banner outside it. And she said that was what began her journey back into her faith and into the church. Sandra was, on her own admission, a rebel, just totally disinterested and argumentative about Christianity. And as life moved on, she prayed one day and she said, "God, I just need to know if you're real. Give me a sign." Later that day, she was driving along Dunbarton Road in Glasgow, stuck in traffic, stuck behind a bus with, would you believe, a Try Praying poster on the back of it. And that was for her the sign. So she went back home and she prayed to receive Christ. The things you can do with the booklet, I mean, it's all very accessible. I guess many of you have read it or seen it before, but the things you can do, so Paul got to day 5, and the thing that he did there was he kind of wrote out a little list of things that he was ashamed of, and it just profoundly touched him. John got to day 6 in this, and he was doing everything he said, and he wanted to ask Christ to come into his life. And he sat down on his settee, he opened the front door and his living room door, and he was going to ask Jesus to come in to his life, to his home, to his life. And he looked up and he had a vision of Jesus there. Just last week I heard of somebody who worked her way through this and got to day 7 on the 3rd time through the book. And she got to day 7 and she just found herself weeping. Something had clicked. She'd connected with God. So I love telling these stories. And I love telling the macro story of how this thing has grown. And it is something that I just want to honor what God has done with this, because it's not so much us, but it is something that God is using. It's a project for churches. It's a multi-church project. It's across the whole of Scotland. I could give you statistics. We bus campaigns, which amazingly we've been able to fund from individuals giving. So the bus campaigns, 54% brand awareness of Try Praying, which is staggering. Advertisers would give that eye teeth to get 5%, and we're sitting on 54%. So this is a big surprise to me. I want you to catch something of my own sense of bewilderment and surprise about this. I never, ever imagined that this would happen. But we put it together, took the initiative, and it's just rolled out, and it's rolled out. And it's accessible for everybody. So that's my second surprise. Try Praying. Blows me away. Third surprise is actually just going back a little bit in time, which was, it is probably the biggest and greatest surprise for me. And you may or may not connect with this. But I had a church background, but by the age of 15, I was kind of beginning to kick over the traces. My brother, Steve, who, I think I'm still doing this, aren't I? Okay, don't move around. My brother, Steve, 2 years my elder, was working his way through to becoming an atheist. And so he would try out on me, his younger brother, over our kitchen table, all his new atheist arguments. And I mean, they're all the obvious ones, you know. How come you say you believe the Bible when it's full of myths and fairy tales? How come you think God's so good when there's all this rubbish stuff going on in the world? How come you said that it's, you know, God made everything, but what about mosquitoes? And what about cancer? And what about diarrhea? He seemed to have a thing about diarrhea, actually. But so all these questions came to me, and I thought, I don't have a clue. You know, the level of debate around our kitchen table was not particularly erudite. So anyway, I went off. I kind of stepped out of any kind of connection with church and Christianity, and I went off to Birmingham to study maths as a happy agnostic. And it was there that I met a guy called Bill. Now, Bill was a Christian who was willing to share his faith with me. So we started talking, and I thought, you cannot be that confident about these things. So I argued with Bill for about 9 months. And Bill got all my brother's questions. So how come you say you believe the Bible when it's all full of myths and fairy tale? And what about diarrhea? and all this stuff, as it were. And we kind of up the way and down the way, we argued. And there were 2 things that I discovered in talking with Bill. He didn't answer all my questions or all my brother's questions, but he answered a lot of them. There were 2 things that I discovered. One was that there is evidence. There is believable, authentic, useful, examinable evidence for Christian faith. You do not need to hang your brains on the wall to become a Christian. The Bible, the New Testament, is the best attested, bibliographically, the best attested document from that period. Way better than anything else like Caesar's Gallic Wars and other writers from the time. The New Testament is very well attested. It is good history. And he talked about, you know, the whole suffering and this, that, and the other. But anyway, that was the one thing that I discovered. First, there's evidence. So to become a Christian, you're not leaping into the dark, as it were. You're actually taking a step of faith into something which is reliable and confident and dependable. So that was one thing. And the other thing was, which I'd never really clocked when I was going to church in my younger years, that actually he was talking about a relationship with Jesus Christ. He was not talking about religion. He was talking about someone who we can get to know. And as I say, I'd never really clocked that in my earlier years. So Bill used to ask me a question. And he'd explained about how we begin this relationship. You begin it by asking Christ to come into your life, by believing him, trusting him to come in. And he would ask me this question and say, Dave, is there a good reason why you don't want to receive Christ into your life? And I always give some answer, no, I can't believe it, or I tried it when I was younger, or this, that, and the other. But he asked me that question virtually every time we met. And it's a very good question, because it's not, have you got reasons why not, but are they any good? And he asked me that question once too often, because I finally understood the question, that actually I still had reasons, but they weren't very good. So for me, it was a totally unreligious, secular setting, but I just felt like God was tapping me on the shoulder saying, it's time to make up your mind. And so Bill said, well, do you want to pray to receive Christ here? I said, what, now? He said, yes. I said, oh, no. Public place, no thanks. But I decided that I was going to do this. So I walked back to the library where I'd been working, and it was a second floor, West Wing, Birmingham University Library, maths books in front of me. And I simply prayed. And I said, God, if you're there, and I'm not sure you are, but if you're there, I want to get to know you. And it was P.S. I don't want to kid myself about it. I want to really know you. So that, for me, was a very significant moment. And 2 weeks later, I had the biggest surprise of my life that I've just been trying to live with ever since. But alone in my room and praying once more and actually trusting that Christ had come into my life, I discovered something that I didn't even think was possible. But I was just aware, I didn't see anything or touch anything, but I was just aware that Jesus Christ was present with me in that room. And it triggered things I didn't know existed, like joy, excitement, peace, all kind of rolled up together, and it lasted about 4 hours. And I just knew, like I'd never known anything else in my life, that Jesus Christ was for real, and he was at work in my life. So that, for me, was a huge surprise. Far more significant than being asked to play the organ in church. And actually, personally, it's more significant than this. But the thing is, it's for everybody. This relationship with God through Jesus, it is for everybody. It's not just for those who are congenitally religious. This is for everybody. And there's good evidence, and we can trust him, and he gives us life here on earth and the promise of eternal life when we pop our clogs and move on. But it is the thing that makes all the difference. So I'm going to sit down, but I just want to commend to you the prayer that I prayed, which is actually in the beginning of this little booklet on page 7. It's, God, if you're there, and I'm not sure you are, but if you are, I want to know you. I don't want to fool myself. I really want to know you. So as I pray, please make yourself known to me. So let me encourage you all just to give it a go. Try praying for a week. And it says on the back, see what happens. Thank you very much.